We live in a world that has declared war on boredom. Every gap has been filled. Every waiting room has a screen. Every commute has a podcast. Every moment between moments has been colonized by content. Something to watch, something to listen to, something to react to, something to consume. We've made it almost impossible to be alone with our own minds for more than 60 seconds at a stretch. And we call this productivity. We call this optimizing our time. We call this staying informed, staying entertained, staying connected. But here's what we've actually done. We've cut off the supply line to our own imagination. Before I tell you what boredom actually is, please consider subscribing, joining, and donating to Lightbulb Letters. It really helps. So what is boredom? Not what it feels like. You know what it feels like. That restless, itchy, slightly desperate sensation of having nothing to fix your attention on. But what it actually is underneath the discomfort. Boredom is the state that occurs when your brain is understimulated from the outside, but fully activated on the inside. When you're bored, your brain doesn't go quiet, it gets louder. It shifts into a mode that neuroscientists call the default mode network, a set of brain regions that become more active, not less, when you're not focused on an external task. This is the network associated with daydreaming, self-reflection, imagining the future, making unexpected connections between unrelated ideas. In other words, the default mode network is where creativity lives, and it only switches on when you stop feeding the machine. Every time you reach for your phone, the moment boredom arrives, every time you fill the gap before it has a chance to open, you are interrupting this process. You are switching the network off before it can do anything. You are choosing stimulation over generation. And then you wonder why the ideas don't come. What's worth understanding is what social media specifically does to this process. Because it's not just that scrolling fills time, it's that it fills time with the most attention maximizing content that has ever existed. Content engineered at enormous expense by some of the smartest people on the planet to be precisely stimulating enough that you never quite tip into boredom, never quite cross the threshold where the default mode network could activate. You are held perpetually in a state of just enough stimulation, engaged but not thinking, busy but not generating, moving but not going anywhere. This is not an accident. Boredom is the enemy of the attention economy. A bored person closes the app. A bored person looks out the window. A bored person starts slowly to have their own thoughts. And their own thoughts might take them somewhere that has nothing to do with the product. So the product is designed to make sure you never get there. Knowing this doesn't make the pull any weaker, but it does change what reaching for your phone means. It's not a neutral act. It's a choice to hand your default mode network to someone else, to let someone else's algorithm decide what your mind does in the gaps. The creative life begins the moment you take that back. Boredom is not just a creative tool, it's a diagnostic one. When you are genuinely bored, not distracted, not overscheduled, not performing busyness, you come face to face with yourself, with what you actually want, with what you're actually avoiding, with the ideas you've been too busy to hear and the feelings you've been too stimulated to feel. This is uncomfortable. This is why we reach for the phone, because the phone is not just entertainment, it's protection. It keeps you on the surface of yourself, skimming, reacting, responding. And as long as you're skimming, you never have to go deeper. You never have to sit with the question of whether you're working on the right things, making the right work, moving toward the life you actually want, or just the life that's easiest to perform. Boredom asks you that question, loudly, in the silence. And the most creatively alive people I know are the ones who have learned to sit with it long enough to hear the answer. There's a story about Agatha Christie that I think about often. Christie, who wrote 66 detective novels and is still the best-selling fiction writer of all time, said that her best thinking happened when she was doing the washing up. Not when she was at her desk, not when she was actively plotting. When her hands were in soapy water and her eyes were on nothing in particular and her mind was allowed to wander wherever it wanted to go. She didn't romanticize this. She didn't call it her creative ritual or her mindfulness practice. She just noticed that the ideas came when she was bored enough to let them. Einstein reportedly said his best ideas came during his daily walks. Walks he took with no particular destination, no particular purpose, no particular thought in mind. Darwin built a thinking path at his house specifically so he could walk in circles alone, unstimulated, until his mind produced something worth writing down. These people were not lucky. They were not more gifted than you in the specific area of having ideas. They were just willing to be bored. They were willing to stop filling the silence. And in the silence, things grew. So here's the question. If boredom is this powerful, if it is genuinely, neurologically, demonstrably good for your creativity, why is it so hard to let yourself have it? Part of it is habit. We have trained ourselves so thoroughly to reach for stimulation that the reflex operates before we're even aware of it. You feel the first flicker of restlessness and your hand is already moving toward your phone before a single conscious thought has formed. But part of it is something deeper, something that has to do with how we've learned to value ourselves. We live in a culture that equates busyness with worthiness, that treats productivity as a moral virtue, that asks constantly, what are you working on? What are you building? What are you putting out into the world? And in that climate, doing nothing, sitting quietly, staring at the ceiling, letting your mind drift, feels almost transgressive. It feels like failure. It feels like you're falling behind while everyone else is moving forward. But this is exactly backwards. The people who never stop consuming never start creating. Not really. They produce things, yes, they publish and post and output, but there's a flatness to work made without space, a thinness. You can feel when you read it or watch it or look at it that it was made by someone who is always running, always reacting, always just slightly ahead of the silence they're trying to outpace. The work that stays with you, the work that reaches through the screen and touches something real, was almost always made by someone who knew how to stop, who knew how to be still, who had learned somehow to trust the emptiness. Here's what I want you to try. Once a day, just once, let yourself be bored on purpose. Leave your phone in another room. Go for a walk without music or a podcast. Sit somewhere and don't make it meditation. Don't make it journaling. Don't make it anything. Just sit. Let your mind do whatever it wants to do. Let it wander and contradict itself and circle back and drift sideways. And when the discomfort comes, because it will come, don't reach for relief. Just notice it. Name it. Sit with it for another 2 minutes. Because on the other side of that discomfort is the thing you've been waiting for. The idea that couldn't get through the noise. The image, the sentence, the solution, the direction. Whatever your creative work has been trying to hand you for weeks. It was never lost. It was just waiting for you to be quiet enough to hear it. You don't need more inspiration. You don't need more input. You don't need another podcast episode or another course or another person telling you how to be more creative. You need 11 minutes of nothing. That's it. The creativity was always there. You just have to stop drowning it out.